The pandemic is over and seemingly eliminating mandates is enough, right? No one needs to worry about getting these COVID shots anymore. We have all moved on, but today's guest is going to tell us why it's important that we still fight. Because as it stands now, the current law does not protect us from vaccine mandates. So I welcome today Brian Festa, who is the head of We the Patriots, a nonprofit legal firm. He's going to talk to us about his latest endeavors, his going to the Supreme Court of the United States. Welcome, Brian. Tell us what's going on with your latest lawsuit. I know it's happening, I believe, in Connecticut, where they're trying to keep some Amish children from going to school because they're not getting the vaccine. Is that right?
So, sort of. The Amish lawsuit is the lawsuit that was brought against the state of New York on behalf of three Amish community schools. That was not our lawsuit, but that is the lawsuit that was recently remanded by the Supreme Court on something called the GVR down to the Second Circuit to be reheard and to issue a new decision. So the Second Circuit initially denied that or dismissed that lawsuit, and so they appealed for review to the United States Supreme Court in a very, very pivotal decision. The United States Supreme Court has ordered the Second Circuit to re-examine that in light of recent precedent, a new precedent set by Mahmoud v. Taylor last year. I can talk about that in a moment. But we have a case that's also at the Second Circuit that's I want to call it a companion case, even though it wasn't brought together with the other one that was brought by us on behalf of a Connecticut school. Milford Christian Church has a daycare and preschool called Little Eagles, and the state threatened to shut them down, just like they fined the Amish schools in New York, the state of New York did, because they continued to accept religious exemptions to vaccinations for the children. So both New York State and the state of Connecticut in recent years eliminated or abolished the religious exemption to school vaccinations. And these schools, because they are religious institutions, both the Amish in New York and this Christian school in Connecticut, have continued to honor the religious freedom of the families that they serve, as they should. But the state says, no, you can't do that. We're going to punish you for exercising your religion, and we're going to shut you down if you continue to do this. So they gave the Milford Christian Church, they gave an ultimatum. They said, either you get all these children vaccinated, or you kick them all out of school, or we're going to shut you down. And they refused to do that. They turned to We the Patriots USA. We filed a lawsuit. I do want to say that we are very proud. We've kept that school open since March of 2023. That school has remained open all this time because of this federal litigation and our agreement with the state. Pending the outcome of this litigation, it is now at the Supreme Court on identical legal issues as the Amish case. So it's possible the Second Circuit, it's not at the Supreme Court, excuse me, it's at the Second Circuit. It's possible the Second Circuit will hear these cases together, and then we can appeal together. You've seen that before, where the Supreme Court will take up, you know, 2 or 3 cases at the same time that all have the same basic facts and issues and hear them together. So that's what we're trying for right now.
Have these schools been in existence for quite a while and everything just came to a head because of the pandemic? Or are these new? How did this all come about?
Well, it wasn't so much because, well, I mean, it could have been because of the pandemic, but really, it was because the state of Connecticut in 2021, in April of 2021, eliminated the religious exemption. So they decided to start auditing these schools to see if all of the children were up to date with their vaccinations. And so they've audited public schools and they've audited private schools. Now, that's interesting because when push came to shove, in the course of our lawsuit, we put the state on the spot and said, because we sued, we said, okay, if you think you have authority over private schools, we sued not only the Office of Early Childhood, but also the Department of Education and the Commissioner of Public Health. Well, the Commissioner of Public Health and the Department of Education came back by way of the Attorney General's office and said, well, we don't actually have authority to enforce this against private schools. So, we shouldn't be named as defendants. So they sort of want to have it both ways. They want to, on the one hand, try to enforce it for all public and private schools, but then say, well, we can't really enforce it with regard to private schools. But the Office of Early Childhood does oversee all the daycares and preschools in the state. And since it says a daycare and preschool, she is still named as the Commissioner of Early Childhood is still named as defendant. So I think it's really just part of this larger agenda, Mary, to make sure that every single child is in compliance, to discriminate against the unvaccinated, discriminate against Christians and other religions, people of faith that refuse certain vaccinations. Some of these families only refuse 1 or 2 vaccinations. It's not that they're refusing all vaccination, although that's their right. But some of them are only refusing a couple of them, but still they're denied an education. And what's important is in the state of Connecticut, in the Constitution, in the state of Connecticut, education is defined as a fundamental right. So whenever you take away someone's fundamental rights, you're supposed to show that there's a compelling interest, such as a public health emergency, with regard to those diseases, those illnesses that these vaccines are supposed to prevent, and that you did it through the least restrictive means possible. Well, kicking all children out of school when there's not an outbreak of any of these illnesses in the state, to me, would not seem to meet those standards.
Well, doesn't our Constitution protect us from this just to begin with? Or how is this even possible?
It does. And that's been our argument all along. But in these, I don't want to get political, but in these far left-leaning blue states, we've seen it over and over and over again, where unfortunately the courts have not ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. We've claimed that the First Amendment free exercise of religion clause protects them. The Establishment Clause protects them. The 14th Amendment protects them, equal protection under the law. We've argued this, and in some states, those arguments have won. But unfortunately, in states like New York and Connecticut and California, the courts have consistently said, no, that doesn't apply. The way they frame this is they say it's a neutral law of general applicability. And that all goes back. I'm not going to get deep into the weeds, but there's a case from 1990 called Employment Division v. Smith. It was an employment case, but basically it said that if the state enacts a law that's neutral and generally applicable, that doesn't target certain individuals of faith or certain population groups, then it doesn't have to withstand strict scrutiny, which is the test that I just laid out. Least restrictive means compelling interest. So that's how they've gotten around it. That's sort of been an end run around, but the court came very close to overturning that decision in Fulton versus City of Philadelphia a few years ago. At least 3 justices thought that it should be overturned, and that all First Amendment freedom of religion cases should be subject to strict scrutiny. It's not a neutral law, Mary, because they still allow medical exemptions, even though it's pretty much impossible to find a doctor to write one in Connecticut and New York. They still allow secular exemptions. Medical exemptions are secular. They're not religious. So you're allowing secular. So if your objection to a vaccination is for a medical reason, a secular reason, we'll allow you into school, but it's for a religious reason, we won't. How is that not discrimination? You tell me. I can't figure it out.
Yeah. So if you are successful in this lawsuit, will that set a nationwide precedent, or will it only apply in Connecticut?
No. So we have our lawsuit in Connecticut. They have the other attorneys have their lawsuit in New York. Both of those are in the Second Circuit. But if this goes to the United States Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court rules that it's a violation of the First Amendment to deny these children religious exemptions, that would apply nationwide. That would apply California, Maine, where they also don't have religious exemption. It would apply all across the nation. So this would be the biggest win in health freedom in our lifetimes, the biggest legal win, in my opinion.
So has your case gone before the Second Circuit, or are you waiting for that to happen?
We're waiting along with them now because their case has been remanded back down. So these 2 cases are pending before the Second Circuit. They could take ours first and then theirs. They could take theirs first and then ours, or they could hear them. Honestly, if it were up to me, and it's not because I don't I'm not a judge on the circuit, but if it were up to me, I'd hear them together
Mhm.
because, in the interest of judicial economy and efficiency, they're nearly identical facts and issues in both cases. I would just hear them together, issue one decision, and then we can decide consolidated whether we want to bring it to the Supreme Court. But either way, it's huge. Whoever's case gets heard first, or whether they get heard together or not, it's a huge development because for the first time, the U.S. Supreme Court is saying, hey, we think you do need to take another look at this. They've never done that with regard to any childhood vaccination case. And we've brought other cases before them. We've tried to get them to hear our other cases. Children's Health Defense has tried to. Other organizations have tried to. They've never done this before where they said, in light of recent precedent, Mahmoud v. Taylor, which was just last June, the Supreme Court in that case, you'll remember it, they said parents have a right to opt their children out of LGBTQ curriculum in schools. If you
Mhm.
remember that case.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, the second that case was decided, I said to myself, this is monumental. This is huge for our cases, our vaccine cases, because that's what we've been saying. The parents they don't lose their free exercise of religion rights, their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse door. Well, word for word, that is what the majority opinion said in Mahmoud v. Taylor. Parents do not shed their right to the First Amendment, religious liberty, at the schoolhouse door. It follows them in, even into a public school classroom. So they've now asked the Second Circuit to apply that to a school vaccine case, a religious exemption case. So I think this is just, honestly, it's the biggest development. Everyone should be talking about this. It's the biggest development in health freedom litigation in our life.
Well, that's wonderful. That's good news. And I hope everybody will go to your website, wethepatriotsusa.org, because Brian Festa, their group is a nonprofit. So they are working pro bono, and this is a huge case. I know you have two other cases that you wanted to talk about. One is regarding a poor child with cystic fibrosis who's been taken away from her mother because she's thriving and being taken away because of her reluctance to give a medication with a black box warning. Is that right?
Yeah, this is just horrific. It's disgusting. So because of a gag order by the court, protective order, I'm not able to release the names or photos. This Florida family court even applied it to third parties. I'm not in the state of Florida, but we're going to respect that order. I'm
Mhm.
not going to release the names or photos or videos, but I will tell you, I watched the body cam footage because when DCF comes to take your child away, they bring a police officer. That's what they always do. In case there's an incident, any violence, they always bring an officer. So I was able to get a hold of that body cam footage. One of the DCF workers was laughing and smiling
Mm.
as she's at the door and going to take this child away, screaming. Child is crying, mother is crying, breaking down in tears. This 7-year-old girl
Mm.
laughing and saying, I don't need a warrant. I don't need anything. I can take your child away before we file anything in court. Goes in and takes the child away.
Wow.
This child was thriving. She was on a treatment that's been used for cystic fibrosis since the 1950s. I can't pronounce drug names like you can because I'm not a doctor, but I forget the name of it. But I have it all in my records. It's in the court filings. She was giving this child a drug that's been used since the 1950s. The child was without oxygen. Often these children on cystic fibrosis, they need oxygen. She didn't have any oxygen, running around, playing, laughing, perfectly fine. The state, after they took the child away, and the reason they ostensibly took the child away is because she wasn't using this newer drug. I shouldn't say it's not brand new, but it's a newer drug with a black box warning, shown to cause death, liver failure, all kinds of adverse reactions reported. They didn't even put the child on the drug for 3 months, almost 3 months after they took the child away. They didn't even put the child. They put her in a foster home, wouldn't put her with her parents or family members. She wanted the child to be placed with family members. Nope, we're going to place her with strangers in foster care.
Wow.
I mean, this is evil. This is pure evil. So we made a commitment here at We the Patriots USA about a year ago that we were going to be on a mission to end medical kidnapping in America. That's medical kidnapping. There is no good reason that child should have been taken away from her mother, and we're going to do everything in our power to bring that child home. We've retained an attorney for the plaintiff here. We paid already the initial retainer, even though we haven't raised it. We've paid thousands of dollars for this case. We've only raised $1,500. There's a fundraiser. If you want to go to the website at wethepatriotsusa.org, you'll see the article about this poor girl. It says, help bring this princess home, because there's a picture of her in a princess outfit, I think an Elsa costume. Click on that article and it'll give you the link to her fundraiser, but it's at the bottom of our page under news and updates. But it's just horrific. I feel so badly for this mother. I've spoken to her on numerous occasions, and this is an outrage. I'm really, really mad about this case.
And this is in Florida?
Yep. Florida, where we have Governor DeSantis and Surgeon General Latipo, right? Everything's supposed to be perfect in Florida. They're ending vaccine mandates. Bad things don't happen in Florida, right?
Yeah, bad things don't happen in Texas either, but apparently, yeah. There was one other case, and I forget what it was about because I was so horrified about this case. Tell us about that. Your one last case.
Yeah, this is another horrible case. It's once again in my former home state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut is denying services to a special needs child just because she's unvaccinated. Again, her family has a religious exemption to vaccinations. Forget about the First Amendment. Let's pretend even that didn't even exist. Even if the First Amendment didn't exist, there is a federal law called the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. It's called IDEA. All right. That says that any school which receives federal funding for special education programs and services, which is every public school, right, must provide any eligible child with special needs with the appropriate or free and appropriate public education. It's known as a FAPE in special education law. They have said, no, we're not going to provide her, but she needs speech therapy. This is an autistic child, okay, who needs speech therapy, who needs occupational therapy, physical therapy. They're denying her all of her services just because she's unvaccinated. So that violates not only the First Amendment, but also federal law in special education. So we have filed a federal lawsuit against that school district as well. I mean, everybody, in your open before this segment, you talked about everybody thinking everything's good now that COVID's over. Life could not be worse for parents who choose not to vaccinate in states like Connecticut, New York, California, Maine. These states have Illinois. I mean, it keeps getting worse and worse and worse because they're doing everything they can to thwart the agenda of what's happening at the federal level. And things are not perfect. I heard your conversation earlier with Shannon. Things are not perfect at the federal level, and I agree with you. There's a lot of things that should be done differently, in my opinion. But still, things are certainly different than they have been, right? And they're pushing back against that now with their formation of their new public regional health alliances in the Northeast and in California. It's just ridiculous. It's all political. And it's actually become much, much worse for families. They're being discriminated against like never before. And it's children that are caught in the middle. These children have nothing to do with these political battles. You know, these children didn't ask to be put in these situations. Children stolen from their parents. Children being denied basic education, basic services. Like her mother can't afford to provide her with these services. You're talking, again, occupational therapy, speech therapy, ABA services. These are extremely expensive. They're supposed to be provided for free through the school, and they can't get them. And as a parent of a special needs child with autism, a vaccine injured child myself, I really, really feel for these parents too. And I mean, it's hard for me not to get emotional. They always say lawyers don't get emotional. So just like they tell doctors, don't get emotional, don't get involved, don't get emotionally involved, be separate, be a robot. Well, I'm sorry. I'm a parent myself. And when I see these families suffering, and that's why I started We the Patriots, is there's so much suffering going on everywhere across this country, whether you're in a red state like Florida or Idaho, where I live, or whether you're in a blue state like New York or California or Connecticut. It's so bad, and we need more people standing up against it. So I'm not just going to give kudos to We the Patriots. I'm going to thank the Bonners, who are the family, the parents of that child in Connecticut. I'm going to thank Pastor Jim Loomer and the people of Milford Christian Church. I'm going to thank the family of the child in California that we have a case of the Ninth Circuit who was also expelled from school for not being vaccinated. I'm going to thank each of those parents for standing up because it takes a lot of courage to do that.
I was just going to say, I mean, I really admire them because the easiest thing to do is cave, and most parents would cave. And I know that, if they're watching, I hope you realize how much we admire your strength for fighting back, because especially with a young child and special needs, and it's just most parents would just give in. And is it true? Is it 5 states that don't allow religious exemptions? I know it's California, Maine, Connecticut, Massachusetts.
Not Massachusetts. So it's Connecticut, New York, California, and Maine. And then in West Virginia, there's been an ongoing battle. So the governor did sign an executive order to allow it, but then it was challenged in court. And so there's been an ongoing legal battle where there was a stay placed on that. So West Virginia never had them, and Mississippi never had them up until a couple of years ago. But due to a court decision, they did finally win them. But so yes, I say five still. I add West Virginia in there because they're still not fully protected either. But it's basically, Mary, 20% of the nation's population does not have the right to opt out. They've lost their First Amendment religious liberty right to object to vaccinations.
Yeah, and it's so important that we go through the judicial system, because I've heard you say before, the executive system, everything could change in a few years, right? So we need to set the record straight with some strong precedents in the legal system, and that's why these fights are just so incredibly important. And yes, last night I talked to Jennifer Kennedy and Brian Ward about the fights
We
against.
love Jennifer. She's the local counsel in our California case I just mentioned.
Yeah, she is wonderful. And, just really brought to light the fact that we are not protected from mandates. I mean, we are still vulnerable if another pandemic comes around. Precedents have been set, and apparently there are about 15 cases left challenging the COVID shot mandates, not surrounding religious exemptions, but surrounding EUA status and whether you can force an experimental medication on people. So there's a lot going on in the legal world that's super important, even though the pandemic's over. And, most of our politicians think that eliminating mandates is enough, but we have to set some precedents so that this does not happen again. So I really appreciate you coming on, Brian. I hope everybody will follow We the Patriots on Twitter and go to your website, wethepatriots.org, wethepatriotsusa.org. And you also have a Substack, correct?
Yes, it's called Free the Law, or you can just search We the Patriots, We the Patriots USA on Substack. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity because this has to get out there. The mainstream media, of course, outright censors or shadow bans all of these stories, even on platforms like X and of course Facebook, Meta, whatever you call it now. They're not free speech platforms. Still, there is massive censorship going on there. So I appreciate people like you and Shannon, everyone at your network that continue to beat this drum, get this word out there so that we can all stand together and fight back, because this is we're in a battle against evil. It's a spiritual battle, I've said from the start. So thank you for everything you do as well, Mary. It's been great talking to you today.
Thank you, Brian. And we'll have you back soon, hopefully with some good news.
I hope so. God bless.
You too.